What's going on, adventurers? So it is March, which means turkey season is coming. So I don't know if you're like me, but I spend a lot of time deer hunting, a lot of time thinking about deer hunting. So I love doing that all through the fall. And man, down here in Texas, it's the end of September all the way through generally the middle of January if you're hunting in the right county with a late season. So you get nearly half your year to hunt deer. So in the off season, well, what the heck do you do? Well, of course you go bass fishing or you go hiking, or in my case, you go turkey hunting. So I have not been into turkey hunting for a really long time. I didn't grow up doing it just because in North Texas, it has not always been that good. Now down in South Texas and far out in West Texas, there have been a lot of turkeys that have been doing well for a long time, but up here in North Texas, DFW area, turkey hunting was just not something I was introduced to. Now, I have friends from kind of all over the U.S., from down south, people from Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and turkey hunting is just what they do. Or even people kind of up north, like up in PA, who are super into turkey hunting. For me, it was not that, but when I discovered it and saw it as a challenge, I was kind of an adult onset turkey hunter, and I got excited about it and dove straight in. And just like other types of hunting, there are so many things to talk about. I think one of the first things that's really important is just where the heck do you go? Well, if you're not hunting where there's turkeys, then you could be the best shot, the best caller in the world, and it's not really going to matter. So I think that's incredibly important. But you can talk about finding birds. You can talk about calling to birds. You can talk about camo. You can talk about how to be stealthy in the woods. But today we're going to skip to the discussion of what a lot of people like to talk about, and that's the firepower aspect of it. So we're going to talk turkey guns. So let's start by kind of reining in and narrowing down this conversation a little bit. So this message kind of goes out to the guy who really wants to hunt turkeys. Maybe he's never done it before and knows you need a shotgun, but don't really know necessarily how it needs to be set up, what you need to have on it, what type of shotgun you need, what features are important, what features don't really matter. Or maybe it's the guy who's been out there with some old gun and he's looking at something that's a little bit more focused towards turkey hunting rather than something that's just an old duck gun or something like that. Now, I know there's a bunch of old-timers out there who are going to say, well, back in my day, I just had a break-action 12-gauge old goose gun with no sights or anything fancy on it, and, well, we killed turkeys with that. That got the job done. Well, I don't doubt it. You can get it done with lots of different setups, lots of different configurations. But this kind of is focused on the guy like me, I guess, who really can't leave well enough alone and likes to be an idealist and make things better. Just like I went through kind of a build episode on my deer rifle or my long-range target rifle, it's really looking at the optimum features for what you're doing with the equipment, not necessarily how can you get it done. Because sure, yeah, you can go to a pawn shop, buy the cheapest shotgun ever, and you know, if you're a great caller and can call turkeys up close, you can probably still get it done. So we're not really talking about that as much as we're talking about what makes a good turkey gun, what makes a purpose-driven, focused on the task, turkey killing machine. Now, I've noticed a lot of shotgun companies are getting more and more into turkey edition shotguns. And I think that's just as digital marketing gets more and more effective and you can target people a little bit better, people are realizing that this is a huge audience. And so pretty much every shotgun company, they've been doing it for a long time, but it's becoming more and more of a thing to have a special edition turkey package version of whatever. And if you get a gun like that, you're generally going to be off to a pretty good start. So I know Remington has an 870 package and an 1187 package that right out of the box is pretty much ready to go. So does Mossberg, so does Benelli. Most of them do. So if you get a setup like that, then you're off to a great start. You may want to tweak it, tune it a little bit, but you probably won't need to do much to it. Now keep in mind that probably 9 out of 10 times those guns did not start out as turkey guns. They started out as something else, and then aftermarket companies started coming out with parts, accessories, things to add on or to modify those guns that made them better for turkey hunting. then these companies like Remington or Mossberg, whoever, partnered with these companies to put their parts in the manufactured factory guns. So a lot of it is done on the aftermarket first, and then eventually turns into a factory-ready item that you can get. So you can do this on your own, a lot of times with a little bit more cost efficiency, or just with a little bit more freedom and flexibility to truly make it your own. So don't feel like you have to be obligated to buy a turkey-specific gun. You can buy a lot of different guns and turn it into a great turkey rig. So that's where I'm going to start the conversation. Should you buy something new? Should you convert an old gun that you have laying around? Should you look at used guns instead of new ones? So all important things to consider. And ultimately, I would say it depends on what you're starting with. Depends on what you've got sitting in the back of your gun closet. If you've got an old 12 gauge that meets a lot of the criteria we're going to talk about later, and you don't really use it for other things, yeah, absolutely, convert it into a turkey gun. Or you've got something that you never use it in the spring for anything else, and you could kind of do a seasonal conversion, but you want to be able to bring it back to being a goose gun or duck gun later on, then there are some good options there. If you're looking at buying a new gun, it really just becomes a matter of budget, not just financially, but also a matter of time. How much time are you going to spend turkey hunting? If you're going to spend a ton of time turkey hunting, it probably makes sense to have a dedicated rig for it. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a new gun, but it means, yeah, carve out a specific gun for that role rather than sharing with some other role. But in terms of, do I get something that's already set up, ready to go, or do I do it myself? Probably depends on budget more than anything else. And the way I'm going to rein in this conversation even further is to kind of focus on the budget or high value side of this. If you want a great turkey gun and budget's not an option, well, go get one of those ready from the factory, ready to go turkey packages. But I think if you're like me, you have a lot of things you want to do. You need to buy arrows. You need to buy gas for your truck. You want to buy decoys. You want to buy tags for some new state. You've got a lot of things in the hunting world that you want to throw your money at. So if you can get a turkey gun that's just as good without having to go out and, spend a lot on it, then more power to you. And that's kind of what we're talking about. So for my own example, I have a YouTube video from quite a while back called My Turkey Hunting Setup. And I nicknamed this shotgun Big Ugly because it's nothing pretty, but man, she shoots straight. It's a great turkey gun. It's killed several birds for me. It's killed deer. It's killed rabbits. It's killed a coyote. It's just a great... It started off as a turkey hunting rig, but some of the features on here make it good for other things as well. But if you want a video version of this and, see me pointing to stuff, go check that out on the Adventure One channel. Search Adventure One Turkey Gun or Adventure One Big Ugly, and you'll find it. I'll be going through all that stuff here. So I've actually got that gun sitting in front of me just kind of as my own reference as I'm going through this stuff. But in general, I'm going to be talking about the generic version of this gun. I'm going to be talking about the concepts that work, not necessarily the specific brands or exact components. I'm going to talk more about my reason behind them and some options. So right off the bat, I wanted to build up a specific gun for turkey hunting, and I wanted to do it in an affordable way. So my first choice was obviously the shotgun platform. What platform do I want? And I think you should view this just like trucks and accessories or cameras and lenses. You're not just picking that item, you're picking the whole market and infrastructure of that item. So I wanted to go with a platform that had a lot of options for chokes, sights, accessories, and was going to be really easy to customize. So with that, I looked at some of the major brands out there who have been making affordable mass-produced shotguns for a very long time, and I kind of narrowed it down to Remington and Mossberg. Now, there are other great turkey guns out there. I'm not going to doubt that, not at all. And frankly, as long as there's enough aftermarket support, it doesn't really matter what brand it is, as long as you can get the parts that you need. So next question is, what type of action do I want? So there's lots of different types of shotgun actions out there. So most common would be a pump, then a semi-automatic, then old school, go to a break action, and there's some bolt action shotguns out there too. Now a lot of those are more for slugs and stuff like that. But I would say the choice ultimately comes down to brake action, semi-auto, or pump. Now, within those action types, again, like any gun conversation, a lot of it comes down to, well, how much do you want to pay and what are you going to use it for? So between those two, I ultimately just went with a pump because a pump is incredibly reliable. It's hard to break. It's really hard to make a pump shotgun jam up. It's just going to work. Now, a brake action is the same way. Incredibly reliable. It's not going to jam up because it doesn't really do anything. You have to manually break it open, take that shot out, put in the next one. I wanted something that I had access to a follow-up shot if I needed one. So I would say avoid a brake action in general for most people. Now, if you're specifically looking at building up a turkey gun for a kid or somebody who's small statured, or you just want something that's simple, safe, educational, a brake action gun's actually the perfect option. From a safety standpoint, you can crack it open, you can see whether something's in the chamber or not. There's no chance of not having a round in the chamber when you thought you racked one in. It's just simple, easy to handle, and easy to understand, like functionally what's going on there. Now, if you are building up a brake action turkey gun for somebody who's smaller of stature, don't get a 12 gauge. Because a brake action gun, because there are less moving parts and there's nothing to absorb the recoil, they tend to just kick like crazy. And especially when you throw a tight choke and a big turkey load in there, it is not going to be fun, especially for someone smaller. So I really recommend, if you're going that direction, check out a 20 gauge. There are lots of great brake action 20 gauge guns on the market. And now with proper ammo, a 410 is actually an option. Now check your state regulations. There are some places where a 410 is still not legal. Like I know in Illinois, you can't legally hunt with a 410, but in Florida and Texas, you can. So it depends a little bit state to state. And either way, you should be really careful about your ammo and choke selection, but we'll get to that in a minute. So if you're going brake action, check out a 20 gauge. Otherwise, I went with a pump. I think it's just kind of an old standard. It's going to work really well. It's going to be super reliable. I've got several rounds in the case that I need them, but why did I go with a pump instead of a semi-auto? Well, for the same capacity, for the same efficacy at what I'm actually trying to accomplish, a pump is a lot cheaper. And also, pump shotguns can be a little bit more accurate. Now, there are some really accurate semi-autos as well, and we're not talking rifle accuracy here. We're still talking, a shotgun pattern at a range of 20, 30, 40, 50 yards or so. A semi-auto will give you fast follow-up shots, which is great for wing shooting, man, especially if you're hunting ducks or teal or doves. I personally love a 20 gauge semi-auto for dove hunting, but I don't use that same gun for turkey hunting. And one of the advantages of a semi-auto is those follow-up shots, but it's not really an advantage in turkey hunting. If you're ever just like taking fast shots, just blasting away, you're probably doing something wrong. You do occasionally need follow-up shots, but never shots that are immediate, that are so fast you couldn't pump the shotgun to take another one. So I think the advantages there don't really help you out, and occasionally semi-autos, depends a lot on model, can be a little bit more finicky to jamming, to did it eject, did it cycle right, stuff like that. Now, if you're running high-powered turkey loads, that's probably not going to be an issue, but just in general, cleaning, maintenance, stuff like that is a little bit more of an issue with semi-autos than with pumps. So that was another thing for me in the category of pump shotguns. Super reliable, pretty darn cheap. I've got more rounds there if I need them, and all in all, a great tool to get the job done. So I personally went with a Mossberg 500, and if you want to go with a Remington 870, great. If you want to go with a Weatherby, I think it's a PA08, great. There are lots of great pump shotguns. So on that shotgun, aside from the action, what features really matter? Let's start by talking about the receiver. I highly recommend a receiver that comes from the factory, drilled and tapped. That was another huge thing for me in the category of the Mossberg 500. It's one of the differences between the Mossberg 500 and the Maverick 88. So if you're familiar with that type of stuff, the Maverick 88 is just a cheaper version of the 500 that for some reason they don't want to put the Mossberg name on, even though Mossberg's already known for being pretty cheap. but the Maverick 88 is not drilled and tapped, but the 500 is. There are some other differences, but that's the one that really matters here. So I would absolutely recommend a receiver that's drilled and tapped for an optic. We'll talk about the optic and that system later, but if it comes from the factory that way, life's going to be easier than taking it to a gunsmith and getting that drilled and tapped. Now, you absolutely can do that, and if you do take it to a gunsmith and get it drilled and tapped, I would say make sure that you're getting it drilled and tapped, not just in a way that works, not in some custom way, but get it done for a standard mounting configuration. So match up the whole pattern of a Mossberg or of a Remington or something like that, so you can tap into that ecosystem of parts. If you've got some no-name shotgun or just something that isn't drilled and tapped from the factory, make it match something else. Another important feature for turkey hunting in my book is the barrel length. So there isn't necessarily an effect on the turkey whether you have a 28-inch barrel or an 18-inch barrel. They're all going to kill a turkey. It's all going to get the job done. It's more just in how you handle the gun, how you manipulate the gun, and walk around through the woods with it. So you absolutely can take a full 28-inch duck gun and turkey hunt with it. I know people who do. It works just fine, but it's a bit cumbersome because keep in mind, when you're turkey hunting, you're probably going to take one shot, maybe two, but you're going to be walking around with that gun all day long. So you want something that's pretty comfortable to walk around with, and you'll probably be going through some thick brush. You're trying to be sneaky, so you don't want something massive. Now, on the opposite of that, for a shotgun to be legal, it has to have a barrel of at least 18 inches. And I'm not going to get into those NFA, quote, firearms that are legal guns that aren't shotguns because they don't really have a good place in the turkey woods. Again, you can kill a turkey with them, but not the ideal tool for the job. So I'm not going to get into that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. Ignore that. But for a shotgun to be a normal legal shotgun, it has to have a barrel of at least 18 inches. One problem with the 18-inch barrel is most of those are made for home defense, or I guess the old school FUD term would be they're called riot shotguns, but they're defensive combat shotguns. So a lot of them actually have good quality heavy barrels, but they are cylinder bore and they are not threaded for chokes. So you need to make sure whatever barrel length that you're going with, it absolutely has to be threaded to take different chokes because a turkey choke is a critical part of the system. So if you can find an 18-inch that is threaded, that works fine, but they're pretty rare. So a lot of times you're going to find stuff kind of starting at 20 inches that are kind of dedicated or decidedly turkey barrels. But I would say 20 to 24 is kind of the ideal range. You can go up to 26, but a lot of those, again, are trap and clay guns or duck hunting guns, stuff like that. They totally work. They just get a little bit cumbersome at that point. So I think the barrel on mine is, I want to say it's 22. It's right in the middle. It may be a 24. It's not a 20, but I think it's 22. So as long as it's in that range, it'll work. So sometimes that means taking an old gun that you have and buying a new barrel for it. Or a lot of times, man, especially in the case of the Remington 870 or the Mossberg 500, you can go to a pawn shop and find just an old beater Mossberg 500 or 870, and then all you have to buy is the barrel. Maybe it has that 18-inch barrel that's kind of that combat home defense barrel, but you don't really want that. So in that case, you don't have to buy a full gun. You can get a smoking deal on a cheap gun and then spend some time choosing a barrel you want. I would say when you're going with this, another difference between the kind of combat style gun or the combat style barrel and a good hunting barrel is you definitely want a vent rib on top. So that will make it more versatile for your sight picture. We'll talk about different sight options a little further along here, but I would say that's definitely something you're going to want. You're not going to want a plain barrel on a turkey gun. And this may be obvious to a lot of people, but you're definitely not going to want a rifled barrel. You'll see some of these shotgun barrels that are 22 inches and they've already got sights built in, and it looks like it would be a great combination, but it's because it's set up to shoot sabot slugs. So it's actually, though it's technically a shotgun, it has rifling in the barrel. And if you're shooting just a regular shotgun load, not a slug, you do not want that. You're going to get horrible accuracy and huge patterns, the opposite of what you want in a turkey gun. So obviously we're talking smooth bores here. So next up, what is important in this gun? I think a 3-inch chamber is another important feature. It's not a deal breaker. I definitely know people who turkey hunt with 2 3/4-inch shells. Absolutely. On the other side, I know people who swear by 3.5-inch shells. In my opinion, I don't think you gain a whole lot more with modern good ammunition by going to 3.5-inch. I think 3-inch is right on the money. You've got lots of great choices, easy to find good turkey loads, and it's going to be consistently powerful, and you just get a lot of pellets in there. 2 3/4 can get the job done, but if you're picking out a barrel to go turkey hunting, stick with the 3-inch. You won't be disappointed. So next up is the discussion of the furniture on this shotgun. So do you go with a nice wood stock? Do you go with a cheap plastic? Does it matter at all? Should I get one that's camo dipped in mossy oak bottomland? Does it even matter if it's camo? So in general, let me kind of tell you what I went with, and then we'll back into the full discussion. So I'm sitting here with my Mossberg in my hands, and it is a cheap plastic stock that is rattle canned in all kinds of crazy camo. And not any real pattern, just kind of threw some leaves on there and kind of masked it off and spray painted it. So I think that answers some questions right off the bat. Does it need to be a nice wood stock? Absolutely not. Will a nice wood stock still kill a turkey? You betcha. If it's the shotgun that you have that you're converting to a turkey gun, don't be worried that it's a wood stock. You don't need to avoid that. You don't need to replace it with something else. It'll get the job done. If you're sourcing something, I like a plastic stock because it's a little bit lighter. I'm not going to put grooves in it or scratch it up, or if I scratch it up, quite frankly, I don't give a damn. So I'm not worried about damaging this stock at all because I know I'm going to be pushing through briars and it's going to get wet and it's going to get banged around on things. So as long as you're okay with having a gun that gets a little bit scratched up, I think that's the right stock to go with. Remember, this is a tool, not a piece of art. I think if you're super into shooting trap and clays and other stuff, then having a fancy gun is pretty cool. But for getting it done in the turkey woods, you don't need anything fancy. This is a tool. So I went with plastic, and I think, so mine's a bit of a Franken gun. This is a Mossberg 500. I think my stock is actually from a 590, but it mates up all the same. It's pretty much the same stock. So camo on your gun doesn't matter. I would say it helps. Turkeys can see incredibly well. They can definitely see way better than deer can, and they will pick you out if you have a shiny gun and it catches the sun, something like that. So again, I know lots of people who kill turkeys with non-camo guns, so it can be done, but I do think there is an advantage to having camo. Now, does that have to be a technical licensed hydro-dipped pattern that came from the factory in Realtree Extra Green or Mossy Oak or QU Verde or some fancy pattern like that? Nope, I would say it doesn't have to be. You just want to look more like your environment than a shiny, glossy shotgun would. And I think to that effect, if you have a nice matte, flat color, just a solid color, kind of like those Magpul stocks. I haven't really used any other stuff on the shotgun side, but something like that is probably fine as well. Now, again, mine just came black, and I rattle can the thing because I don't care if the paint doesn't really hold up, if it gets scratched up. I just see that as character building over time. So if you want something that you're going to take a lot of pride in the way it looks, then yeah, go get one of those camo pattern ones, or you can even have somebody do a nice like Cerakote or Duracoat pattern on there. If you want something that just kind of builds character, and mine frankly looks a little bit Boba Fett at times, then yeah, don't be afraid to rattle can your gun. So in general, that's a good overview of the shotgun. One feature that I have in mind that I did not discuss, it was because it was a feature that I had the option to buy it, but I wouldn't say it's required. I have a nicer trigger in my turkey gun. I think this shotgun was originally the Turkey Thug edition version of the Mossberg 500, And so it came with basically a Savage AccuTrigger, but I think it might have actually been before it was licensed, and I think it was involved in a lawsuit, and they only made this for a short period of time. I think they called it the lightning bolt action trigger, and then they quit making it for several years, and now they've brought it back. So if you have an option to buy a shotgun with a lighter trigger or a paddle trigger, kind of like the Savage AccuTrigger, I'd say that's great because you're going to be taking a more precise shot with a turkey gun. So a lighter, nicer trigger is good to have. You're shooting it more like a rifle than you would be shooting, if you're wing shooting at ducks or doves or something like that. So it's good to have, but absolutely not necessary. I would say it's not critical at all compared to the other features I talked about. So just in general, we've got a proven action on our gun. I like a pump. Semi-automatic can be fine, but something that's proven in an ecosystem with a lot of other parts. We've got a barrel that's a 3-inch chamber, 20 to 24 inches. It's got a vent rib on it, and we've got lightweight furniture that we're not afraid to damage, and maybe that's decorated in whatever color we want. So that outlines the gun pretty well. Now's the discussion of what the heck do I bolt on this thing to make it better. So I mentioned getting a barrel that's threaded for chokes earlier, so let's talk about your turkey choke, because I think that's critically important. If you're just into dove hunting, your choke doesn't really matter as much. Like a factory choke is, for all intents and purposes, just as good as an aftermarket choke. A lot of duck guys shooting steel will start to notice a difference, and I think for turkey hunting, you will really notice a difference. So at a minimum for turkey, you're going to want a full choke. So a full choke, I think, will get it done on a turkey at 20 out to 30 yards. If you're going to even consider anything beyond that, I do think you want a specialized turkey choke. Now, you'll see turkey chokes that are rated as extra full or double extra full, but that doesn't necessarily mean as much because those aren't really standardized measurements. What you can look at is the constriction on a choke. So that'll be a measurement, and it's measured the same way as caliber. So it'll be in thousandths of an inch. So you'll see a constriction that says something like 0.665. So that's 0.665 inches at the muzzle. So that tells you how much it tapers down from the original barrel diameter. And again, there's not a right or wrong answer on there, but in general, the tighter the constriction, the more it's generally going to help your range. It's going to help you have a tighter pattern that will punch out further. Now, up close, the tighter pattern actually is a disadvantage. So if you know you're only going to take a turkey at 20 or 30 yards, then your factory full choke may actually be a good option for you, because it means you're going to get enough pellets in the head of that bird, but you're not going to have a pattern that's so tight that you're going to miss, because it can happen. I've seen people do it. So you don't want a pattern that's crazy, crazy tight if you know you're limited to short ranges. But if you want to reach out there further, the number one way to do that is to get a tighter pattern. Now, you'll see some of these turkey package guns that already come with a turkey choke. A lot of times, those are pretty good chokes. 9 times out of 10, they're made by somebody else who's already making turkey chokes, and then they just private label it for the shotgun company. So you're generally not going to go wrong there. Now, when you're picking out a turkey choke, if you decide, I want something more than my factory full choke, which, again, I recommend, it's probably the better way to go. But when you're doing this, I recommend don't look for the absolute cheapest option out there. Yeah, you can go buy it and it'll work, but it's only going to be a little bit better than your factory full choke. So I'd say if you're already allocating money to go buy something for the purpose of improvement, spend a little bit extra to kind of get that next step up. Now, you don't have to go spend $100 on a choke tube to get something absolutely amazing. There are lots of great options at half that price that will work really well. Lots of good name brands and just really good designs. And it's amazing how much the designs differ in turkey chokes. One thing that you'll see on a lot of them is porting. And I think porting does one thing well. It sells turkey chokes. People look at porting and they're used to seeing all these compensators and flash hiders and stuff on rifles, so they get excited about it, thinking, oh, that'll reduce recoil, or that'll, help keep the muzzle down and on target. I think by the time you're doing it on the far end of a choke, it's not going to do hardly anything for recoil reduction or changing the deflection angle when you take a shot. So I would say don't make porting a high priority. Make constriction and just patterning kind of your top two priorities. And just talk to people what they like. Look at forums about what works good in the particular gun and barrel you're running. Me personally, I'm shooting the TrueGlow Headbanger. I absolutely love this choke. I've shot other TrueGlow chokes in the past, and they got the job done. I've killed birds with both the gobble stopper and the strut stopper, but the Headbanger is the tightest patterning of them, and so I highly recommend this. It's for a lot of different guns. Now, you don't have to get this one. There are a lot of other great tubes on the market, but I'd say at least take a look at it if you're sourcing a choke. So with the discussion of the turkey choke also comes the discussion of ammo. So there are a lot of great turkey loads out there, and this is where I would say it's absolutely worth it to go with a dedicated turkey load. Most turkey loads are, I'd say number 5 is probably the most common. 4 shot would be the biggest. 4, 5, 6 are all common, and then there are some interesting blends out there that have a combination of different sizes, like the Federal Third Degree. I want to say it's a combination of, it's like 5 6s and 7s, or 4 5s and 7s, something like that. Those are pretty interesting, but I don't think you have to have a blend. I don't think it's necessarily better, but I would say definitely go with a turkey load, not just something in a size 4 or in a size 5, because you can find duck loads or pheasant loads or just small game loads in those shot sizes, but it's not the same. The way they pack the wad is not the same. A lot of times the actual pellets, most turkey loads are copper-plated pellets that fly a little better, which is wildly different than something like a steel or tungsten duck load. So go with a turkey load. You won't regret it. It'll pattern better. It'll be more powerful. Now, in terms of how much do you want to pay for that turkey load, oh goodness, it can go as high as you want it to. I think you can go to the store, and if you've got a decent gun and a pretty good patterning choke, you can go buy a pack of Winchester Super X shells. They're not cheap, but remember, when you're turkey hunting, you're going to spend all day and take a shot or two. It's not like when you're dove hunting and it's pretty normal to go through 2-3 boxes of ammo. And in fact, most boxes of turkey loads come in 5 packs or 10 packs for that reason. The actual shot, yeah, you're talking $1, $1.50, sometimes a couple dollars a squeeze, but it's because that pretty much is the bird. It's like rifle shooting. You're going to be taking very few shots, but you want those shots to count. So go with a good load. The load for me for the last couple of years that I have absolutely loved is the Winchester Longbeard XR. So when it came out, it was really interesting looking at that load, because if you cut it open, you'll basically see that it's all glued together. There are some other companies doing this too, but I think it was Winchester who really started it. They call it their shot lock technology, but it's basically just all their pellets glued together. So it travels down the barrel almost as one solid projectile, and it doesn't start breaking up really till it gets squeezed by the choke. And so that means it wants to stay together. So this ends up being a very tight, very consistent pattern. And so I took a bird out at, I think it was 56, 57 yards, well beyond 50 yards with that pattern. And now it wasn't an instant kill. That bird fell down and was flopping, and I ran up to it and pinned it down just to make sure. But, you know, the gun absolutely knocked it down at that range. I'm not necessarily advocating that. I think you should always know your pattern, know what it can do. But with that load, I was able to do that. So it depends a little bit on what choke you're running, on what chamber, obviously, you're running. But there are lots of great options. This year, I'm experimenting with the Apex Ammo GT3 load, which is a TSS, which is tungsten super shot. It's really interesting because the pellets are actually a number 9 pellet. And when I told that, I immediately was just like, no. I use 7.5s for doves. No way am I using a number 9 for turkey. I didn't even know there was a number 9. But in fact, there is, but it's tungsten. So a number 9 is still a very tiny pellet, but in terms of the high density of tungsten, it has the mass of something more like a number 5 or number 6 in standard lead shot. So it means you still get the punch, the kinetic energy of that larger pellet, but you get a lot more of them. So it means you're going to get more pellets in the kill zone, and that's going to have a better effect at longer ranges. So I've patterned it out this year. I'm going to try that. The Winchester Longbeard is my backup if I run out of that Apex ammo because it's crazy expensive, but man, it patterns well. So all that to say, there's lots of great turkey loads out there. You can pay as much as you want to pay. Look at your own budget, make that decision. Generally, if you pay more for something, you're going to get better ammo. I think that's pretty consistent in the world of ammo. But just make sure you're buying an actual turkey load, not something else that you're just convincing yourself can get the job done. So next up, you've got a shotgun, you've got a choke, and you've got ammo. Technically, at this point, you can kill a bird if you can line it up right. So let's talk about sights. I mentioned a vent rib earlier because you're going to be looking down the rib with any sort of aftermarket sight system. And even if you're just using a bead, you're going to be looking down the rib. If you have a mid bead, take that thing off. I hate them. They don't help. They cause more confusion than help. I don't think for any type of shooting that I'm involved in, whether it's dove hunting, turkey hunting, I hate mid beads. So take that thing out and focus on your front bead. So I think a front bead is good, and I know there's a lot of people who will hear, well, Grandpa killed all these turkeys with nothing more than a brass bead up front. And yeah, you can get it done. But I think having a fiber optic bead up front is going to help you, especially in the low light of turkey hunting. You really want to be able to see that front sight well. But I think equally important is having a rear sight. So when you're wing shooting, your eyeball basically is the rear sight. You're lining up your eye down the length of the vent rib, getting a quick glimpse at that front sight just to see where your barrel's tracking, and you're swinging through. That's great. But when you're turkey hunting, you're shooting a lot more like a rifle. So having a rear sight, making sure you're properly aligned, is how you put that tight pattern exactly where it needs to go. So there are several different options, from a 3-dot setup to a rear peep style setup. Again, that kind of gets into personal preference. I think True Glow fiber optic sights are always a good route to go, just because you'll be able to see them in low light, and they're easy to install on just about any vent rib. But I think the most important thing is have a rear sight. Now, some shotguns have an option to install a rear sight on the receiver, and a lot of times this is the same rear sight that you would see in kind of a tactical or combat setup. I would say actually avoid this for a turkey gun. I would say you want both your front and rear sight mounted to the rib, because that way there's no question about how they're aligned. Once you get it zeroed, it's generally going to stay there. Any walk between the barrel or the receiver isn't going to change your sight picture. But then, especially if you're the guy who has a waterfowl gun and you're just seasonally converting it to be a turkey gun, you can have a turkey barrel that has your sights on it, pull that off, put on your waterfowl barrel that's got your waterfowl choke tube in it, and you're ready to go duck hunting. Then when you're done with duck season in January, take that thing off, put your turkey barrel on, your sights are still on there, your choke tube's still in it, and you're ready to go. So I'd say sights that mount to your barrel, in that case, are better than sights that mount to your receiver. So that's for the case of irons or fiber optic sights. Now, where that differs a little bit is going with an optic. Pretty much any optic mount is going to mount to your receiver. So there are some options out there to clamp to a vent rib, or to basically go in a spacer between your stock and your receiver. Those can work. I'm not going to get into too much detail on those because you can kind of get in the weeds on those. So I would say the most standard solution is just to mount a Picatinny rail on the receiver of your shotgun. So why Picatinny instead of Weaver? Well, the actual dovetail mention is the same on Picatinny and Weaver, but Picatinny has slot cuts at a consistent rate all the way throughout, whereas Weaver doesn't necessarily specify that spacing. So if you're going to go either direction, if it would fit on a Weaver, it'll also fit on a Picatinny rail, but not necessarily vice versa. So that's why I think the Picatinny is the better choice. So you get that mounted on your gun. Now make sure you use blue Loctite when you put those screws in. That'll just help make sure that they don't walk out and you keep everything nice and tight. Do not use red Loctite. Now, Loctite is notorious for probably some of the worst packaging design ever. The blue Loctite comes in the red bottle and says the word blue on it, and the red Loctite comes in the blue bottle. It's bad. Just go by what it says, not by the color of the packaging. So if it says blue, that's what you're going to want, because if it's red, man, you might as well use JB Weld on there because you're not going to get that stuff off. So use blue Loctite to hold that rail down, make it nice and firm. And that rail, they're all pretty much the same. Just as long as it specifically lists that it's compatible with your gun and the hole pattern that you're using, it's going to work fine. The number one mistake I would say people make is not getting it firmly mounted on there, because a 12 gauge shotgun, it kicks a lot, so you need that sucker nice and tight. So we put a rail on the shotgun, but why? What optic are we putting on there? Now, there are people who hunt turkeys with scopes, but I wouldn't recommend it, because at the realistic range that you're shooting, I mean, you're more likely to kill a turkey at 10 yards than you are at 60. And so I think the common range is probably 20 to 50. So do you actually need a magnified optic to shoot at any of those ranges? If so, I think you're more likely to be in a position where you should be reevaluating the range at which you're shooting than you should be questioning the optic you need. Because if you can't hit a turkey's head with a shotgun pattern at 50 yards and you need a scope to do it, I think the better step is to restrict your range a little bit than to get a higher power optic on a shotgun. I really like using a red dot for a number of reasons. In low light, you'll be able to see the dot nice and crisp and clear, unlike a scope. You'll be able to see it very clearly, very easily. You can adjust the brightness as you need. So whether you're in broad daylight or you're in just barely legal shooting hours, there's a brightness setting that fits that. One feature that I feel like is overlooked is parallax, and that's really important in a red dot sight. Any optic has parallax or parallax error. So it's the amount that if you're not centered on the optic, your point of aim is going to be off a little bit. And in scopes, it can be pretty significant. In iron sights, there's even a little bit of parallax. But in red dots, generally, as long as you're past a certain distance or within a certain distance, depends kind of how the optic's rated, they can be parallax-free or so little parallax that you won't observe it. So, okay, that's a lot of terminology, but what does that practically mean? Well, it means if a turkey kind of sneaks up from the side and you're not perfectly lined up on the gun, are you going to miss or are you going to hit it? I think a red dot optic that's really forgiving on parallax, it gives you a lot of grace in that as long as you can see that dot and line it up, and then you get a good trigger pull on it, you're going to kill that bird. Even if your head's not down centered behind the optic, even if the optic's not in the center of the window, it just is a little bit more forgiving. And I think for other types of shooting, that doesn't really matter that much. But for turkey hunting, when a bird walks out and then is really close and you can't move or you're going to get busted, having that forgiving, parallax-free red dot is a huge advantage. Now, in terms of how you mount the red dot on here, that kind of comes into what red dot you have. As a general rule, I would say get as low to that Picatinny rail as you can. The fact that you have a rail on there already means you're going to be up above your vent rib. And there are some products that try to get around this, like the Burris Speed Bead setup that mounts it way too far back, in my opinion, with the goal of getting it down low in the rib. Again, remember you have that forgiving parallax, and all you have to do is put the dot on the bird's head, so it doesn't have to be aligned with your ribs. So that doesn't really matter that much. You just want to keep it low and comfortable so that your head's in the right place so that stock doesn't hurt you when the gun kicks. So if you've got something like a Vortex Strike Fire or something with a tall AR style mount, you're not going to want to use that. You're going to want something that mounts nice and low. So the optic I'm actually using is the TrueGlow TrueTech Micro, and this platform is designed, well, frankly, it's pretty similar to a Trijicon RMR. It was designed for pistol platforms with a cut slide. Now, I don't have this like milled into the receiver or anything like that. I'm using the factory Picatinny mount on there, but because of that, just with that design, it's a very small, compact optic, and it works really well for bashing through the turkey woods. If you've got something a little bigger, that's fine, but I would say a 20 millimeter red dot is ideal. I would not really go to a 30 or 40. Now, those do give you a wider field of view, which can be nice just for having a big window that's easy to see out of, but for moving that thing around in the woods, there's not a whole lot of advantage. And I've used sights like that, but my current tendency is to go with something small and compact. So this TrueGlow TrueTech Micro or something like it, like a Burris Fastfire or a Vortex Viper, something like that is a great option. And you've got easy to access brightness controls, so you can turn that thing up or turn that thing down as needed. And this has a 3 minute of angle dot, which I think is about right. So if you're not super familiar with what that means, 3 minutes of angle roughly means at 100 yards, this is going to be about a 3-inch dot. So at 50 yards, it's going to be about 1.5 inches. So that's still smaller than a turkey's head. So I can be really precise with that dot, but it's not so fine that I'm going to lose it. So I think that size is great. Up to about a 5 MOA dot, I wouldn't go much bigger than that. Otherwise, you start to lose precision at that point. So anywhere from 2 to 5 works great. Highly recommend a red dot. But if you don't want to shell out the $150 for this TrueGlow sight, I would say just save up till you can do it, or stick to cheaper iron sights or fiber optic sights mounted to your barrel. But as long as you have a more accurate sighting system than you would use for wing shooting, you'll be at an advantage in the turkey woods. So we've discussed the gun, the barrel, the choke, the rail, and the optic that's on there. One thing that I think is important in a turkey gun that is different than my other shotguns is a sling. Generally, when I'm wing shooting, I hate having a sling on there. It gets in the way, it gets tangled and stuff. I never use it when I'm actually shooting. It's generally a bad thing that I don't like. But when I'm turkey hunting, this kind of goes back to the same conversation of barrel length. Remember, you'll be setting up on a bird and taking one shot. Maybe you'll do that 2 or 3 times in the day if you get multiple chances to set up on different birds. But either way, you're going to be lugging this gun around a lot. And unlike shooting doves or ducks or anything like that, where you're mostly sitting in one place, you're going to be highly mobile. So you're going to have a turkey vest or some sort of bag or something, because you're probably going to have calls. You may have something to sit on, some sort of a chair or just blow up pad, something like that. You're probably going to have decoys. You're going to be dressed in full camo. So you get to have a lot of gear when you're turkey hunting, which is cool, but it means you got to carry all this crap around with you in the woods. So having a sling to just sling your shotgun, not really to use for any sort of shooting, but just to carry it, man, that helps a lot. So I would say absolutely necessary in my book. Now, in terms of the budget, what do I have as far as my sling? Because when I talked about my hunting rifle and my tactical rifle, I had kind of fancier slings set up on there. On my turkey gun, I just have a super cheap Allen Co. neoprene sling. Basically the cheapest thing I could find that was still comfortable. If it gets wet, if it gets dirty, I don't care. I just want something that I can carry this thing around with. So I absolutely use this sling every day when I'm out in the turkey woods. Well, man, we have covered a lot. And if that discussion doesn't give you a general idea of what you should put into your turkey gun, I don't know what will. Once you get your gun set up, I think it is important to get targets, get out there, get it patterned, know your distance, know where you can get a good solid pattern on the head of a turkey, practice a little bit before season, and then with that set up, if you can call and if you can get on birds, your gun's not going to be a problem. You're going to be able to knock them dead. So now I've rambled more than I thought even I could about turkey gun setups, but I hope you found this informative. Hope you learned something. Hope you're starting to get excited about turkey season. Maybe you're a nut like me and you have your turkey call in your truck and you're practicing as you're driving around. Whatever you do, I wish you the very best of luck this season. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.